How we doing this morning? I was talking to Michael Jernigan. My name's Landon. A lot of y'all know me. I've been going here for several years. And I got a call to ministry in my life about 3 years ago. And Jern texted me about, I guess, a month or so, a month and a half ago. You know, the main man, Michael Jernigan. And he said, "You want to preach on Sunday morning?" I said, "Sure." So here we are, and we're going to roll with it. We're going to see where it goes. He asked me if I wanted the headset. I said, no, I'm not ready for that. One arm free. I don't need two free hands. We'll go with one, and we'll see where it goes. So we're going to start out for the Sermon on the Mount today. And at this time, when Jesus preached the Sermon on the Mount, his word had already spread. People knew who he was. People knew what he was about. He had a lot of followers at this time, and he had a lot of people who were, skeptical, and a lot of people who were against him. And at this time, right before the Sermon on the Mount kicks off, Jesus was healing people. People were they had heard his message, they had seen maybe miracles he was doing, and they were bringing loved ones and everything to him, and he was healing them. He was casting out demons, he was curing disease, people were being set free, and so that's going on. And then Jesus, the way the Bible says it, he realizes the crowd, he kind of just stops healing. He's in his zone, and he just stops healing. He looks around, and he says, "There's a lot of people here." So he tells the disciples, he's like, "Look, I'm done healing. Get together, calm these people down. We're going to go up on the mountain, and I'm going to preach to these people." So Jesus is speaking, and he speaks on everything, y'all. I mean, he's bringing the word. And a lot of times in the Gospels, you see Jesus, and he's speaking, and he's using imagery, and he's using parables. But in this, a lot of times, he's just telling straight up, this is how we do it. When you're in this situation, this is how it's done. And he's speaking to everyone in the crowd. But then he stops. Or a little early on in the sermon, he stops speaking to everyone in the crowd, and he just starts speaking to a select few people. See, there were people there that day that had been following Jesus. His disciples were there. There were people that had been following him for a long time, and they were all in. And then there were people there that day that weren't. That they were just kind of seeing who this Jesus guy was. He's calling himself God. So he's like, we're going to go see how he does. We're going to see what this guy's about. They weren't following him yet. And when Jesus gets to this point in the sermon, he wasn't talking to those people. Jesus starts talking to just the ones who were following him intently. And he says these words. It's in Matthew 5, 14 through 16. I think we have it up there. "You are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on a stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, that they may see your good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." So like I said, a lot of times when Jesus was speaking, he would speak in parables and speak in imagery. And a lot of this sermon he doesn't, but right here he is. He's talking about light. How we are the light of the world, and that light should not be hidden. So what was the light he was talking about? A lot of the people there probably didn't understand. The people who he wasn't talking to didn't understand. And even the people who were believers probably were like, okay, he's talking about light. What does that mean? Where are we supposed to go with that? Well, if you look ahead in Scripture, it's not going to be on the screen, but I'm going to read it to you. In 1 Peter, used the same imagery. He's talking about light. And it says, "But you are a chosen people, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, God's special possession." He's talking about us. We are a chosen people. We are God's special possession. And he says this, "that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness and into his wonderful light." What is the light Jesus was talking about? How we have light in us, not to put a bowl over it. It's the light that we were once in darkness. And we have been called out of that darkness into his marvelous light. And Jesus says, don't put that under a bowl. The light Jesus is talking about. It's interesting the way Peter describes this. He says, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness. Called out. You are ones who are called out. In the Greek, the word that means called out ones is ekklesia. I took Greek this year. I get to show off a little bit of it. There we go, Jim. So the Greek word means called out. That is the same word that is used for the church. So the church are the people who are called out of the darkness, out of the world, and into God's marvelous light. And Jesus is saying, look, that light that you have, God's marvelous light, don't put it under a bowl. So why does this need to be said? Jesus is talking to his followers. Jesus is talking to people who are already invested, already all in with Jesus. So why does he need to say, look, you got my light. I see it. You have it. Don't put it under a bowl. Why would they even think about doing that? Why would they not be living for him? Why would they not be showing his light to the whole house? See, what Jesus knew was a lot of people didn't like him. Jesus knew there were persecutors coming. Jesus knew that people would be coming after them, telling them, look, you're wrong. This guy, he's not who you should be following. And they knew that in the midst of that, when people were in adversity, they would start saying, look, I'm not going to follow him. They would live out their lives. Like, it's easy for us to come to church and live for Jesus and worship, but then when we go to work and people don't agree with us, we cover up the light with a bowl. See, Jesus knew that was coming. Jesus knew it's not a difficult thing to follow him, especially in the midst of people who also don't follow him. There's always something blocking the light. Jesus knew that people wouldn't understand. People don't understand Jesus until they have an encounter with him. How could they? How could just what we tell them be enough until they have an encounter with him? 1 Corinthians 1:18, Paul warns us that the message of the cross is foolish to those who don't believe. To us, that message, that same message of Jesus, the message that gives us life, is foolish to those who don't believe. So how could it be easy to live that out in front of them? If they think, living like that, you're a fool. That's what Paul warns us about. And he knows it's coming. Jern last week, he stood in front of us, and he said, when we were talking about this church plant, and he said that 86% of Randolph County is unchurched. That struck a chord with me, y'all. 86% of Randolph County does not go to church. And I got to thinking why people don't come to church, and there's several reasons. There's a lot of reasons. I'm not saying this reason that I'm talking about today is everyone's case. It's not. But there's several reasons people don't come to church. I think one of the main ones is people see all the bad things that happen with the people in the church. They see all our shortcomings, and they think, well, if the people that serve God have shortcomings, God must have shortcomings. If the people who serve God have flaws, God must have flaws. See, let me talk to you about the church for a second. The church is God's plan A, B, and C. That's it. Jesus came down, he lived his life, he died, he took our sin, he went back to heaven, he left two things. He left the Holy Spirit so we could have access to God all the time, and he left people to spread his message. That's us. We're the people to spread his message, but we're imperfect. So when people see our imperfections, they see them on Facebook, and they see them on the news, and they maybe something they've seen in their life, some experience they've had in their life, they think, well, why would I deal with that? If those people are imperfect, God must be imperfect. But what they see, all that stuff they see is not why they don't come to church. It's why they think they don't come to church. But that's not the reason they don't come to church. They don't come to church because of what they haven't seen. And what they haven't seen is his marvelous light, because we got it under a bowl. Jesus calls us to live out our marvelous light. Don't stick it under a bowl. And that's what we do because it gets hard. And because people haven't seen that, look, we've seen it too. We've seen all the shortcomings. We've seen all the things wrong with the church. But we're still here. Why are we still here? Why do we still believe? Because we've seen the light. And we know what outweighs it. They've seen all the shortcomings and they haven't seen the light. So they don't know why to live for Jesus. Let's look through here. People will start to identify you a lot of times as a follower of the church. That's what they see. They don't know Jesus. They don't see Jesus, but they see the people in the church. So that's how they identify you. A follower of the church, and we are not. We are part of the church. We are part of the body of Christ, yes. But that's not what we follow. We follow God the Father, God the Son, and God the Holy Spirit. That's who we're called to follow. But people don't know that. What they see is the church, so that's who they say we follow. I'll give you an example. Talking about shining the light. Well, let's say this. You sit down for lunch. All your coworkers are around. They don't believe. And you bless the food. That's shining your light. Not fully, but that is a way to shine your light. You bless the food. People see that and they don't think, tell me if I'm the only one that thinks this. Their first thought is not, they're blessing the food because, their first thought is because they're blessing the food because they go to church. That's why they're blessing the food. That's not why we bless the food. We bless the food in remembrance of Jesus, but they don't know that. They don't see that. All they see is, look, all church people bless the food, so they're blessing the food because they go to church. See, part of following Jesus and living like Jesus, you have to understand who he was. Jesus had no shortness of boldness when he lived. He had no shortness of boldness. Jesus wasn't preaching to all these people and spreading his message, and then he saw a Pharisee and then quiet down. He didn't do it. He knew they didn't like him. He knew he was ruffling feathers, but he had a mission and he carried it out boldly. But us, sometimes we put the light over the lamp. See, if you walk through the day and the only time you shine your light is to bless the food, that's not enough because people don't associate that with Jesus. People associate that with the church a lot of times. But as Jesus opened eyes with his teaching and his miracles and what he believed in and who he was, we have the same opportunities. We can still open eyes of people. If blessing the food is not enough, I'll give you two things that I have found that opens people's eyes. People don't get it. Loving everyone and forgiving. There is nothing you can do to be more like Jesus than to love everyone and forgive. And when people see you do that, they don't just think they're doing that because they go to church. They see something different in that. They don't understand it. Loving the people that are the hardest to love, that are the most annoying, that are the most hard to get along with, that no one else loves. No one else treats them the same way. If you do, that opens eyes. To the people who know they've messed up and know you shouldn't like them because you go to church and what they do is against church. If you love them, that's when you start getting questions like this. You know everything I do is against what you believe. Why do you still treat me like this? Why do you still love me? The reason we do it is because Jesus did. That's not putting the bowl over the light. That's letting the light shine. And that is when you can tell them, look, I do it because Jesus loved me first. I don't do it through my own strength. I do it through the marvelous light that I've been given. He pulled me out of darkness into his marvelous light, and now I'm showing it. The Christian life will open eyes because that's what Jesus did. It takes boldness, though. It is not easy to walk in your work or whatever and live boldly and see someone who you know, God's telling you, you need to go pray for that person. But your mind's telling you, no, I don't have to. I don't think they're a believer. It might offend them. It's not easy to take that step and go pray for that person. It's not easy when you've had a tough day, you've had a long day, and God's calling you to love on somebody and encourage somebody. It's not easy to take that step of boldness and let his light shine through you. It's much easier to cover that light with a bowl. It takes boldness to live this Christian life. So we know we need boldness, and we know we need that great faith to have boldness. But how do we get it? Well, we're going to look at a story today in Daniel 3. So if you have your Bibles, you can go ahead and turn there. I'll be in a little bit of Daniel 1 and 2 as well, but mostly it's in Daniel 3. Anybody grow up in children's church, Bible school? If you grew up in Bible school, you know this story. You've heard this story, believe me. Oh, it's already up there a little bit. But let me give you the backstory. So Babylon takes over Judah. Israelites are in captivity again, like 20 times by now. But so the Israelites are under the captivity of Babylon. And Babylon has a king, King Nebuchadnezzar, one of the most evil men in Scripture, y'all. And he builds a 90-foot statue of himself, 90 feet tall. And he brings everybody together, all the wise men in the land, all the higher-ups, all his servants. And he says, look, I got this 90-foot statue, gold, built. I'm bringing y'all all in. What I want you to do is, when you hear the music, it's like a flute, horn, all that stuff. He said, when you hear the music, all you got to do, bow down and worship the image. And when you worship the image, you're worshiping me. And everybody was going to do this. Everybody was going to worship this image. So they play the music. Everybody bows. Everybody's worshiping the image of King Nebuchadnezzar. And there's 3 guys out in the crowd, standing up, probably smiling. And some of the people tell his servants tell King Nebuchadnezzar, look, there's people out there, they're not bowing, they're not worshiping you. And he gets furious and he brings them in, and this is where we'll read what happens. Furious with rage, Nebuchadnezzar summoned Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Those were the 3 that were standing out in the middle of the crowd. So these men were brought before the king, and Nebuchadnezzar said to them, is it true, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, that you do not serve my gods nor worship the image of gold I have set up? Now when you hear the sound of the horn, flute, zither, all the music, when you hear the music, if you are ready to fall down and worship the image I have made, very good. But if you do not worship it, you will be thrown immediately into a blazing furnace. So he gives them a second chance. They knew before that if they didn't bow, they were getting thrown into a furnace. He says, look, I know first time, maybe you didn't hear us. I'll give you a second chance. We'll do it again. Let's see what their response is. Let's see. And Nebuchadnezzar says, then what God will be able to save you from the blazing furnace, from my hand? Verse 16, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego replied to him, King Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you in this matter. If we are thrown into a blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. Listen to this next part. But even if he does not, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up. Whew. Can we do that this morning? I'm not talking about looking in the face of a blazing furnace. I'm talking about in our problems. Can we look at the bills that are coming in and say, look, I know God can provide. I know God can deliver me from this. But even if he doesn't, he's the one I want to serve. That's faith, y'all. That is powerful faith. I know my family member's sick. And I know God can save him. God can heal him. God can bring mending. But even if he does not, he's the one I'll serve. That's my prayer this morning, that we can do that. But that's a different sermon. So after this, Nebuchadnezzar flips out, y'all. I mean, he is mad. He is mad. The blazing furnace that he was talking about, I'm assuming it was already hot enough. The word doesn't say this, but I'm assuming it was already hot enough to overcome a human and kill them. I'm assuming they didn't have it like 88 in there. It was probably like, it was hot enough. It was going to kill you. He flips out. He says, look, crank that thing up. 7 times as hot as it was. And you know the people, imagine being that guy's job. Like they don't know how hot it is. They can't tell how hot the furnace is. And he says, crank it up 7 times. So they don't know what to do. They're just like, we'll throw some more stuff in there, make it hotter. I don't know. But he says, crank it up 7 times as hot. And he's going to throw Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in it. Think about this. When I was reading this, I thought about this for the first time probably yesterday. They still were walking to the furnace. They still could have turned back and said, look, yeah, you're for real this time. We'll serve it. We'll worship the statue. But they didn't. In chains, they walked to that furnace and still boldly said, no, we're going to follow God. So let's look at what happens. The king's command was so urgent and the furnace was so hot that the flames of the fire killed the soldiers who took Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And these 3 men, firmly tied, fell into the blazing furnace. It killed the people who brought them up. That's how hot this fire was. Then King Nebuchadnezzar leaped to his feet in amazement and asked his advisors, weren't there just 3 men tied up when we threw them in there? When we threw them into the fire? They replied, certainly, your majesty. He said, look, I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed. And the 4th looks like the son of the gods. Nebuchadnezzar then approached the opening in the blazing furnace and shouted, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out. Come here. So Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego came out of the fire, and the satraps, prefects, governors, and royal advisors crowded around them. They saw that the fire had not harmed their bodies, nor was the hair on their head singed. The robes were not scorched, and there was no smell of fire on them. So these guys faced a king. Literally, he said, I'm going to kill you if you don't bow. And they said, look, we know our God will save us. We know he has that power. But even if he doesn't, we're not going to serve you. But he walked them into the furnace. He threw them in there, and the whole time, their faith in God was enough to where they had the boldness to say, look, still not going to serve you. Those are 3 guys. I don't think anyone would disagree. Those are some bold guys. That's bold faith right there. So let's see where it came from. We got to look back in their lives to find out where this boldness came from. So, I talked about where these guys came from. Talked about how Babylon came and overtook Judah. Well, King Nebuchadnezzar, when he did this, he said, look, go through the land, find me some Israelite boys of royal families. He said, bring them in. We're going to see which ones of them are able to serve me. He said, all right, so he sent his people out. They found all these boys, brought them in. And I don't know how many there were. They brought several in. And the word of God says this. Among those who were chosen were some from Judah, Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. The chief official gave them new names. To Daniel, the name Belteshazzar. I don't know if that's right, because you know how when you write and you're typing a line and you get to the end and it kind of hyphenates and moves it down to the end, moves the rest of the word down to the end? That's the deal in my Bible, so I can't really tell. It just throws me off. But I think it's Belteshazzar. To Hananiah, Shadrach, to Mishael, Meshach, and to Azariah, Abednego. Look, y'all, I love some biblical names. Some good biblical names. A lot of y'all know I work at a church camp down the road. And when there's not a week-long camp, we have a lot of day camps that come in and things. And I love every single time a day camp comes in, I ask every boy I see, what's your name? Because these parents, they dive in the Word to find the names of their kids. Okay, for me, I have 3 tiers of biblical names. Tier 1 is like, you hear it, and you don't even think of it as a biblical name. Like Mark, John, Joseph. Like those, you hear them, and you know that these are people who are influential in the Bible, but you don't think of them right off the bat as biblical names. Then there's like tier 2. And tier 2 is you hear it and you know it's a biblical name and you think of it as a biblical name, but they're still pretty common in America. Like Isaiah, Jeremiah, Abraham, things like that. You hear them, you're like, okay, biblical name. But then there's tier 3. Now, there's some qualifications to get in tier 3. Tier 3, it's got to be your first name, and you got to go by the full thing. Your name can't be Habakkuk, and then you go by like Bacchic. No, you got to go by the whole thing. And I've met some tier 3s at that camp, y'all. I'm talking about like, you know their parents are in the Word, because if they weren't, they would have never heard of these people. There's some that are kind of on the fringe, like maybe tier 2, maybe tier 3. Like I've met several Malachis, and I can't tell like that. I've heard that before. But then there's some, like, I'm talking 8, 10-year-old boys born in North Carolina, in America, not born in like Israel. I've met 2 Hezekiahs out there. That's what I'm talking about. I have met a Uriah. And my personal favorite, this year, I met a little boy, and his name was Enoch. That was his name. Like, this is a guy who was probably born in like 2010 in America. Like, I'm not saying these aren't just common names. Like, they may be somewhere, but just not in America. Like, if I was, like, when I grew up, if I was to have a son, and I was to name him, like, Heinrich or Helmut, pretty common name, just in Germany. Like, these might be common names, but when you hear them here, it's kind of, I love it. I love to hear some good biblical names. But anyways, they changed these boys' name. Daniel to Belteshazzar, Hananiah to Shadrach, Mishael to Meshach, and Azariah to Abednego. Now, these names, my man Jeremy was talking to me about this week. These names that they gave them, these were not compliments. Like, they gave them names. They were the Israelite boys, and this was before they were chosen for anything. These were just the kids who were brought in, and they gave them these names as insults. Like Shadrach, I looked up what Shadrach meant. One of the translations of Shadrach is servant of sin. They knew these boys believed in God the Father, the same God we believed in, so they gave him names that are like way against that. Servant of sin was his name. So these boys, they're going through, they're trying to be the ones that gets chosen to serve the king and be in the kingdom. And the king tells them, he's like, look, y'all, all you boys, you're going to eat what we eat. Like, we'll provide all the food for you. You got to eat what we eat. And then you will drink what we drink. And you'll have wine with us, and we'll dine and all that. Be a good time. And Daniel steps up. Belteshazzar. He steps up, and he says, no, we're not going to do that. He says, I'll tell you what. We're going to eat what we want to eat, and we're going to drink what we want to drink. And one of the chief officials of the king says, look, I really don't care what you eat. I don't care. But the king, you know, we're talking about Nebuchadnezzar, the crazy guy. He told me you got to eat this, so I'm going to make sure you eat this. And Daniel says, look, I'll tell you what. Go tell the king, for 10 days we will eat nothing but vegetables and drink nothing but water. And if we look weaker, we don't look as strong as these other men, we'll eat whatever you want to eat. So God provided for them 10 days. All they ate was like broccoli and spinach and carrots, and then all they drank was water. And at the end, they looked stronger than the rest of these boys. So God had shown his favor on these boys already at this young age in their life. So it comes time to decide who was going to, you know, be the servant of the king and all that. And I don't know if we have this 214. Do we have that? Yeah, there we go. Nope, it is 117. I'm sorry. It is 117. My fault. Okay, I think I gave them the wrong one, but it's fine. I'll just read it for you. To these 4 young men, he gave knowledge and understanding of all kinds of literature and learning. And Daniel could understand visions and dreams of all kinds. The king talked to them, and he found none equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service. So these boys were chosen. God had his favor on them. He blessed them with knowledge. He blessed them with learning. He blessed them with understanding. And he had his favor on them from the beginning. And these are the ones that were chosen to serve the king. We read a little later on. And remember, we're trying to find where these boys had their boldness from. We read a little later on in chapter 2. And the king has had a dream. and nobody can interpret it for him. Remember, Daniel has the ability to interpret dreams. He didn't ask Daniel. He asked these magicians and these astrologers, and nobody could tell him what the dream meant. And like I said, this was not a kind and forgiving man. So the decree was, all right, these people can't determine my dream. I'm killing everyone that is in any sort of power position in Babylon. Everyone's dying. So the king sends out the head over the army, whatever, and he says, look, kill anybody who's in power. Remember, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had been promoted. They were in his service, so they were in this position. So they were sentenced to be killed. And the guy comes to kill Daniel, and this is the encounter that they had. 17. I'm just going to read it. I think it's 14. 14. Yeah, first sermon. Okay, so when Arioch, that was the guy who was sent to kill everyone, the commander of the king's guard had gone to put to death the wise men of Babylon, Daniel spoke to him with wisdom and tact and asked the king's officer, why did the king issue such a harsh decree? Arioch then explained the matter to Daniel. At this, Daniel went in to the king and asked for time so that he might interpret the dream for him. So we don't know why Daniel was able to get through to Arioch. It says he spoke with wisdom and tact, but we don't know why Arioch would listen to Daniel. But Daniel says, look, hold on. God's given me the ability. I can interpret dreams. Give me a night to figure it out. I'll come to him. I'll come to Nebuchadnezzar tomorrow. Then it says, then Daniel returned to his house and explained the matter to his friends, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Remember, that's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Daniel tells them what's going on. And he urged them to plead for mercy from the God of heaven concerning this mystery, so that he and his friends might not be executed with the rest of the wise men in Babylon. So Daniel came to his boys. He's like, guys, this is what's going on. We're going to get killed if I don't interpret this dream. And he knew he could count on Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego because they served the same God and they were bold in their faith. He knew they had boldness. And he knew they had faith in God. So he said, look, and he urged them to plead with God. He didn't urge them that they should go out and learn to protect themselves. He didn't urge them to go out and buy some armor because somebody's trying to kill you. He urged them to plead with God that he may know the vision and the dream and that they wouldn't be executed. So he goes and they do this. Let's see what happens. They pleaded with God all night. You know, they were in prayer. They were on their knees praying. And during the night, the mystery was revealed to Daniel in a vision. Then Daniel praised the God of heaven. So Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had been together, man. They had been through it. They knew what was going on. This happens. Daniel says, look, guys, we got to pray for it. They prayed and they were delivered. And through that deliverance, their faith in God got stronger. Through that deliverance, they knew who God was. They knew that God was a bold God and they had to serve him boldly. When Nebuchadnezzar made that 90-foot statue and they knew they were going to have to bow before it, you know they did the same thing the night before. You know the night before they were like, look, we're going to be killed if we don't bow to this thing. We can either bow and be fine, nothing happened, or we can be bold and not live in the darkness and live in the light and choose to serve God. They're like, all right, fine, we're going to serve God. Look, we got to pray. We got to ask God to intervene because with the choice that we've made to serve him, we're going to be killed because of it. And they did. And they asked God to intervene. And he intervened. And they were freed. But it's because of that boldness and that faith that they had had before, years before with God. And they knew who God was. They knew he was faithful. And they knew he would deliver him. That's where their boldness came from, because they had been through it. I know what you're thinking. We're probably not going to be told, if we don't do this, if we don't shine our light this week, we're going to be thrown into a blazing furnace. It's not going to happen. Your boss is not going to come to you and say, look, if you decide to live for Jesus this week, you're getting thrown into a furnace. At least I hope not. If he does, I don't know what advice I can give you. Maybe unionize. I don't know. Get some change in there. But so we're not going to do that. That's not going to be the case. The music's not going to play, and we're not going to be asked to bow and worship this idol. But I'll tell you what might happen. The music's still going to play. You walk in and everyone at lunch is talking bad about someone, running their name down. That's the music. You going to bow? Are you going to join in? You going to run somebody's name down? Or are you going to say, look, that person's created in the image of God and they were saved by God and they are worth not talking like this about? That's the music. It looks different on our front. It looks different than what they had to go through, but it still takes boldness to go through. I don't know where the band is. Oh, shoot. I don't know where the band is, but they can come on up. I'm almost done. Not quite, though. So, these boys had their boldness because they knew who God was. And they knew what he was capable of. And it's important for us to know who God is, too. Anybody read? Anybody like to read fiction? Anybody like to read fiction? I don't, but I took a C.S. Lewis seminar this past year at school, and we had to read several snippets of C.S. Lewis books, and we had to read a couple books in their entirety. And one book we had to read, it became real popular a couple years ago. They made a movie about it. Made a movie about it. Chronicles of Narnia, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. It's a children's book, which is kind of whatever. But it has a lot of insight on how we can view God. And what this book is about is these 4 kids they're staying at a summer home that they're living in. And they find this wardrobe, and they go into it, and there's a magical land in the wardrobe. It's fiction, I told y'all. But so they go in this land, and there's a lot of imagery of the life we're supposed to live. There's a lot of imagery of God in this book. And the God figure is Aslan. He's a lion. And he is the ruler, and he is God in this land. And there's this great scene in the book. And there is these 2 girls, Lucy and Susan. And it's the first time they see Aslan. It's the first time they see God. And the question they ask when they first see him, some of y'all may know where I'm going, but the question they ask is not, does he love us? The question they ask is not, will he protect us, even though he does in the end? The question they ask is interesting. It's, these girls are struck, they're awestruck, and they're fearful, and they say, is he safe? That's the question they ask about God. First question they ask about God. Is he safe? Now, what the girls wanted to know is everything going to be easy? If we choose to serve him, is everything just going to come to us? Nothing's going to be hard. We're not going to face any adversity. It's not going to be hard to serve him. And the response they get is probably the best fictional line I've ever read. The response they get is no. No. He's not safe. But the response they get doesn't just stop there. The response is no, he's not safe. But he's good. That's the God we serve. They were asking, look, is everything going to be easy? They said, no, it's not going to be easy. You're going to face adversity. You're going to go through times where it's hard to serve him. But he's worth it. You're going to go through times where it's not easy to let your light shine. You're going to want to put that bowl over the lamp, but he's worth it. But he is good. That is the God we serve this morning. Stand with me as I pray us out.